He woke up to the sound of his alarm ringing. The morning light barely peeked through the curtains, but it was enough to remind him that another long day awaited. As a single father, his mornings always began early, trying to squeeze in just a few quiet moments before the chaos of getting his child ready for school. The house was small, just enough for the two of them, but it felt even smaller when bills were piled up unpaid, and his bank account was running on empty. He ran a hand through his hair, still trying to shake off the sleep from his tired mind. With a sigh, he dragged himself out of bed, careful not to wake his daughter. She was his world, the reason he pushed through every single struggle that came his way. No matter how tough things got, he couldn't let her see the weight of his stress. She needed him to be strong. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that made the walls feel heavy with worry. He glanced at the kitchen, where a few leftover dishes from last night still sat. The sink needed to be cleaned, but that could wait. As usual, there was no time for anything except rushing through the day. He had to get his daughter's lunch ready, help her find her homework, and make sure she left for school with everything she needed. His own breakfast? That would have to wait until after he dropped her off. As he went about his routine, his mind kept circling back to one thing: money. He had a full-time job at the factory, but it barely covered their expenses. Some weeks he was forced to choose between buying food or paying the rent. He hated that feeling, the one where you had to choose between basic needs, but it was all too real. And this month rent was due in just a few days. It wasn't that he didn't work hard enough. It was that the world outside was unforgiving. No matter how many hours he worked, it seemed like there was never enough. He had been living paycheck to paycheck for as long as he could remember, but this month felt different. This month he didn't know how he was going to make it. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his daughter's footsteps coming down the hallway. She was sleepy, rubbing her eyes as she made her way to the kitchen. She smiled when she saw him, and for a moment everything felt okay again. His heart swelled with love for her. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, yawning. "Did I miss breakfast?" He chuckled softly, brushing the worry off his face. "You're just in time. I was about to make you some pancakes." She lit up at the mention of pancakes, and for a moment the heaviness of his situation disappeared. He focused on the task at hand, making sure she had what she needed for the day ahead. They ate together, talking about small things: her school projects, her friends, the latest book she was reading. He listened carefully, trying to be present, even though his mind was still racing with the worry of what was to come. After breakfast, he drove her to school. The drive was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the radio. His daughter stared out of the window, lost in her own thoughts. He couldn't help but think about how innocent she still was, how much she relied on him. He couldn't let her down. Not now, not ever. When he dropped her off at school, he gave her a quick hug and watched her walk into the building. His chest tightened as he pulled away, heading back to the house. He had a few hours before he had to be at work, but there was one thing he needed to take care of first. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed a "For Rent" sign on the house next door. He had seen it before, but today, it caught his attention more than usual. There was a small part of him that had always considered renting out a room in his house, just to make ends meet. But he hadn't been sure about it. He wasn't the type to welcome strangers into his life, especially with his daughter around. But what choice did he have? With a sigh, he made his way to the phone. He wasn't sure how it was going to work, but something had to change. He couldn't keep living like this, constantly scraping by. The rent was too high, the bills too overwhelming. He had to do something to make ends meet. He picked up his phone, dialing the number on the sign. His heart beat a little faster as he waited for someone to pick up. He knew he had to be careful. He couldn't just trust anyone who came along. But he was desperate, and when desperation took over, it made decisions feel easier. The phone rang a few times before someone finally answered. It was a woman's voice, soft and polite. "Hello?" she said. "Hi," he replied, trying to sound calm, even though his nerves were getting the best of him. "I saw the ad for the room for rent next door. I was wondering if it's still available." She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, it is. Are you looking for a place to stay?" "No," he said quickly, realizing how it must have sounded. "I'm actually looking to rent out a room. I have a small house, and I thought maybe I could rent a space to help with the bills. It's just me and my daughter. We're struggling a bit with rent and everything." There was a pause on the other end. "I see. Well, I might be interested. Are you looking for someone who can pay up front, I need a place where I can stay for a while. He felt a small relief hearing her mention paying up front. Maybe this was the solution he was looking for. Yeah, that sounds good. I could really use someone who can pay on time. It'd help a lot. She agreed to come by later in the day to take a look at the room. It was a small space, but it had everything she would need. A bed, a desk, and a little closet. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The whole thing felt a bit strange, inviting a stranger into his home, but at this point he didn't have many options. The hours seemed to drag on as he waited for her to arrive. He cleaned up the house, tidied up the room he was planning to rent out, and did everything he could to make it presentable. His nerves were on edge, but he knew this was the only way forward. The alternative was a future filled with even more worry and uncertainty. Finally, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find a woman standing there, her face tired but kind. She was in her late 20s, visibly pregnant, and her clothes seemed worn. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "I'm Anna. I called about the room?" He nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She didn't seem like she was in any kind of hurry, and there was a sadness in her eyes that made him feel for her. She was alone just like him, and he couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to this point in her life. But for now, he didn't ask. There was no need to get personal. He just needed to know if she could be a good fit. As they walked through the house, she seemed to take it all in quietly. She asked a few questions about the rent, the rules, and how long the room would be available. He answered her as honestly as he could, and when they reached the small room upstairs, she seemed to approve of it. "This will work," she said softly, as if the words had been weighed down by more than just her decision. "I'll take it." The deal was made, and just like that, he had a lodger. Anna was moving in the next day. He tried to push the unease from his mind. It would be fine. He just had to keep his head above water one day at a time. But little did he know, the decision to invite Anna into his home would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual, filled with a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity. Today was the day Anna would officially move in. He tried not to overthink it, reminding himself that he had no choice. Rent was piling up, and this was the only way to make ends meet. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that having a stranger in the house was going to change everything. By the time he finished getting his daughter ready for school, he had already cleaned the guest room thoroughly. He had washed the sheets, vacuumed the floor, and even placed a small bouquet of flowers on the nightstand. He wanted the room to feel welcoming, not just for Anna, but also for himself. After all, he would now be sharing his home with someone whose past and intentions he knew very little about. When his daughter left for school, he heard a quiet knock at the door. Taking a deep breath, he opened it to see Anna standing there, holding a small suitcase in a tote bag. She smiled, but it was a faint, tired smile that made his heart ache. Her hands rested lightly on her growing belly, and he noticed the way she moved carefully, trying not to strain herself. "Hi," she said softly. "I hope it's okay." "I didn't bring too much," he shook his head. No, this is fine." "Come in." She stepped inside, and for a moment they stood in the living room, unsure what to say. He wanted to make her feel at home, but he didn't want to overstep. Finally, he offered, "I'll show you the room again, just so you know where everything is." She nodded, and they walked upstairs. The room looked just as clean and organized as he had prepared it. Anna set down her bags and sat on the edge of the bed, letting out a small sigh of relief. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This is really nice." "I didn't expect it to be so comfortable," he smiled. "It's nothing fancy, but it should be okay for you." For the next few hours, they settled in. She unpacked a few clothes and personal items, while he tried to maintain his usual routine around the house. It felt strange hearing someone else moving around in what had always been his small world. But it also felt lighter. Somehow, having another person here made the loneliness easier to bear. Over the next few days, their routine slowly started to form. Anna was quiet, often spending her time reading or resting in the room, and he respected that. He noticed small things about her, how she carefully avoided overexerting herself, how she sometimes looked out the window and seemed lost in thought. There was something gentle about her presence, even though he knew very little about her. One afternoon, he came home from work earlier than usual. He had noticed Anna struggling to carry groceries from the car a few times before, and he decided to offer a hand. When he stepped into the kitchen, he saw her placing bags on the counter, wincing slightly as she shifted her weight. "Need some help with those?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I guess I could use a hand." "They're heavier than I thought." Together they unpacked the groceries. It was simple work, but in that small, quiet space they shared a few moments of conversation. She told him about her favorite foods, the ones she craved during her pregnancy, and he listened, trying to remember them for future meals. He noticed the way she smiled when she talked about simple things, and he realized that behind her quiet demeanor, there was warmth waiting to be shared. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the house began to feel more like a home with Anna in it. She wasn't just a lodger, she was someone he could talk to, someone who understood struggle in a way that matched his own. They talked about small things at first, recipes, local stores, the weather, but eventually, the conversations deepened. One evening, while they were sitting in the living room after dinner, Anna shared a little more about herself. She told him that she had been in a difficult relationship, one that had ended badly. She didn't go into details, but he could sense the pain in her voice, the kind of pain that came from betrayal and fear. She admitted that she was trying to start over, to protect herself and her child, but that it hadn't been easy. He didn't respond immediately. Words felt inadequate. Instead, he offered a smile and a simple, "I get it." It wasn't a deep conversation about feelings, but it was enough to show her that she wasn't judged, that someone was listening. Over time, he began to notice small acts of kindness from her as well. She would offer to help with little chores, even if it was just tidying up the living room or folding laundry. She never overstepped, but she contributed in her own quiet way. It was almost as if both of them were learning to coexist, respecting each other's space while slowly building a connection. One rainy afternoon, he returned from work to find Anna sitting by the window, looking out at the drops hitting the glass. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and she seemed lost in thought. He didn't want to interrupt her, but he also felt a curiosity he couldn't ignore. "You okay?" he asked softly. She turned to him and nodded, though her eyes betrayed a mixture of sadness and worry. "I'm fine," she said, but he knew better. He could see it in the way she clutched the blanket, and the way her gaze flickered away when he looked at her. He didn't push her to talk, but he made her tea and set it down next to her. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the sound of rain filling the room. Sometimes he realized just being there was enough. Sometimes the simple act of sharing space, even quietly, was a comfort neither of them knew they needed. As the weeks went on, he began to notice other things too. Anna was careful with money, always making sure to pay her share on time. She was polite, considerate, and never caused problems. And yet there was a subtle sadness in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. It wasn't sadness born of this house or her current situation. It was deeper, something from her past that she carried with her wherever she went. He tried not to pry, but curiosity gnawed at him. Who was she before she came here? Why was she alone? And why was she so careful about the life she had left behind? Every time he thought about asking, he hesitated. He didn't want to push her too far, not yet. Some truths were best shared when the time was right. One evening, while cooking dinner, he caught her humming softly to herself. It was a simple tune, barely audible, but it filled the kitchen with warmth. He realized in that moment that life, even in its messiness and struggle, could have small moments of beauty. Anna, with her quiet resilience and gentle ways, had brought a new rhythm to his life, one that he hadn't realized he needed so badly. And then there were the little gestures that made a difference, like the way she remembered to refill the sugar container, or the way she would leave notes of thanks when he cooked extra meals. She wasn't just living here. She was quietly making a place for herself in a home that had always been small and suffocating. One night, as he was tucking his daughter into bed, he caught himself thinking about Anna again. He realized that his initial hesitation had faded. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was part of their lives, someone who had brought comfort and stability in a way he hadn't expected. He didn't know her past fully, and he didn't know what the future held, but for now, having her here made things feel lighter, almost manageable. As he turned off the lights and closed the door to his daughter's room, he felt a quiet sense of relief. The house was still, the sounds of the night settling in. He knew the road ahead would still be tough, bills would still need paying, work would still be exhausting. But having Anna here changed something. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, life didn't have to be so lonely. And so life in the small house continued. The mornings were busy, the days long, but now there was someone else in the mix. A gentle presence that reminded him that even in the hardest times, connection mattered. Anna, with her quiet ways and careful heart, was no longer just a lodger. She was a part of their small world, and with every shared meal, every quiet conversation, every small act of kindness, the bond between them began to grow. It wasn't friendship in the traditional sense, not yet. It was something quieter, more fragile, and more meaningful. It was a connection born out of struggle, out of shared humanity, and out of the need to survive. And though neither of them fully understood the journey ahead, they both knew that having someone by your side, even in silence, made the burden a little easier to bear. Little did he know, the bond they were forming was just the beginning, and the truths waiting to surface would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, trust, and the people we choose to let into our homes and hearts. The days after Anna moved in began to blend together, like the slow rhythm of a clock ticking in the background. Everything seemed a little more manageable, a little less lonely. The house felt fuller, but not in a chaotic way. More like it was finding a new balance, with Anna becoming part of the fabric of their daily lives. The quiet moments were just as important as the conversations, and he realized that the house wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was becoming a home again, filled with more than just the sounds of his daughter's laughter or the hum of the refrigerator. Despite this new sense of ease, there were moments when Anna seemed distant. He noticed that sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, her gaze would wander out of the window, like she was seeing something far beyond the backyard, far beyond the small world they shared in this house. It wasn't sadness exactly, but a kind of longing. He didn't ask about it. He knew better than to pry too deeply. But it made him wonder what had brought her here. Why had she ended up in his home? One evening, after a long day of work, he came home to find Anna sitting in the living room, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes focused on a photo album she had found on the shelf. He hadn't expected to find her there looking so still, as if she were lost in thought. The album was old, worn at the edges, filled with pictures from his past. His daughter's first steps, their last family vacation before everything changed, the day they moved into this house. Anna's fingers gently traced the edges of the photos, her expression unreadable. He paused in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. But she sensed his presence and turned to him, offering a small embarrassed smile. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy." He shook his head. "It's fine. You can look at whatever you want." He walked over and sat beside her on the couch. For a moment, neither of them said anything, both of them uncertain of what to say next. The air felt heavier than usual, as if the silence was pressing them into a conversation neither of them was ready for. Anna closed the album, her fingers lingering on the cover for a moment longer than necessary. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I'm not sure how to do this," she admitted quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "Live like this, I mean. It's been a while since I've felt safe, since I've had a place where I can just breathe." He didn't know what to say at first, but the words came to him easily. "You don't have to explain. You're welcome here." She nodded, as if his words were a quiet comfort she hadn't known she needed. "I didn't expect it to be like this. You've been kind, and I don't even know how to repay you for letting me stay here. I wasn't sure if you'd want someone like me living here." He frowned, not understanding what she meant. "What do you mean?" "I'm just trying to get by." "You're not a burden." She paused before responding. "I just didn't think I'd find someone who understood what it's like to feel trapped. To have to hide parts of yourself because if you don't, you'll lose everything." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded with meaning. He didn't press her for details, but he could feel the weight behind them. It was the same feeling he had when he lay awake at night, worrying about the future, wondering how much longer he could keep everything together for his daughter. There were things in his past he hadn't talked about, things that still haunted him, just as there were things Anna wasn't ready to share yet. They sat together for a while, neither of them speaking, but it felt like something important had been acknowledged, something that couldn't be taken back. It was the beginning of something deeper than just two people sharing a house. It was the beginning of trust. Over the next few days, Anna seemed more comfortable. She spent more time in the living room, occasionally joining him and his daughter for dinner or helping out with small tasks around the house. She was quieter than most people, but there was something calming about her presence. His daughter seemed to take a liking to her, often asking her about her pregnancy and what the baby was going to be like. Anna always answered with a smile, even though her answers were brief, and there was a softness in the way she spoke about the baby, like it was the one thing in her life she felt certain about. One afternoon, as they were sitting at the kitchen table, he noticed Anna looking at the phone in her hand. She was staring at it, her thumb hovering over the screen as if debating whether or not to make a call. He had seen her use her phone a few times before, but she never seemed to call anyone. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing the tension in her posture. She quickly put the phone down, a little too quickly, as if trying to hide something. "Yeah, I was just thinking about something." She forced a smile, but he could tell it didn't reach her eyes. He didn't push. Instead, he took a step back, letting her keep her space. He knew better than to force someone to share something they weren't ready to talk about. After all, wasn't that what he was doing himself? A few more days passed, and things seemed to settle into a quiet rhythm. But just as things were beginning to feel normal, something happened that changed everything. One evening after dinner, Anna had left the house to run some errands. His daughter had already gone to bed, and he was sitting on the couch watching the news when he heard a knock at the door. It was late, later than usual for someone to be visiting. He hesitated for a moment, wondering who it could be. He wasn't expecting anyone. But when he opened the door, he was taken aback by the sight of a man standing there. The man was dressed in a suit, his face sharp and polished, but there was something about his presence that immediately put him on edge. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. The man glanced at him for a moment before speaking. "I'm looking for Anna," he said, his tone formal but insistent. "Is she here?" He felt his stomach drop. The way the man spoke, so sure of himself, unsettled him. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes scanning the inside of the house almost like he was inspecting it. "I'm someone who needs to speak to her. It's important." 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Who was this guy, and why was he looking for Anna? Before he could say anything else, Anna appeared in the doorway behind him, her face going pale as she saw the man standing there. She froze for a moment, her eyes wide with shock. "Who is he?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with concern. Anna's hands shook as she stepped forward, her voice low and trembling. I didn't expect him to find me here." The man looked from Anna to him, his expression unreadable. "I think you and I need to have a serious conversation, Anna." Anna stepped back, her eyes pleading with him. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want him here." The man didn't take his eyes off her. "I don't think you have a choice." He stood in the doorway for a long moment, unsure of what to do. This man, this stranger, had come to their home, and Anna was clearly afraid of him. Something wasn't right. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. Anna, who had been so quiet, so reserved, now seemed like a person with secrets. Secrets that were about to spill out whether she was ready or not. And in that moment he realized just how much he didn't know about her past. But what was clear was this. He wasn't going to let this man in. Not without understanding who he was and why he was so insistent. "I'm afraid you're going to have to leave," he said, his voice firm but calm. "Anna is staying here, and I don't think you should be here." The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. After a long, tense silence, he turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the doorway, both shaken. Anna stood there for a moment, her body trembling slightly. She didn't say anything, but her eyes spoke volumes. There was more to her story than she had let on, and it was clear now that the past she was trying to run from had finally caught up with her. He didn't know what had just happened, but he did know one thing for certain. Things were about to get a lot more complicated. The man didn't come back that night, but the tension hung in the air like a thick fog, making everything feel heavier than usual. Anna didn't speak much after the encounter, retreating into her room, her face pale and distant. He didn't press her for answers, though he wanted to. He knew something had changed between them. The secret she had been keeping, whatever it was, had surfaced, and it had shaken her. He had a restless night, the kind where sleep just doesn't come. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole scene over and over in his head. Who was that man? What did he want with Anna? And why had she been so terrified? These questions swirled in his mind, but there was something else there too. a sense of protectiveness. He didn't know Anna's past completely, but he had come to care for her in the quiet, unspoken way people care for each other when they share a space, a life and a struggle. The next morning, he didn't see Anna at breakfast. His daughter was already eating, humming along to a song she was making up as she went, but the usual quiet presence of Anna was missing. He felt a small pang in his chest. He wanted to ask her what had happened, but he didn't want to push. He was careful not to bring it up, but he couldn't help glancing toward the guest room every now and then. By late morning, Anna finally emerged, her eyes still red from lack of sleep, but she looked more composed than she had the night before. She stepped into the kitchen, her hands trembling as she poured herself a cup of coffee. She looked at him for a moment, then quickly looked away, avoiding his gaze. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Morning," he replied, keeping his voice casual, even though his mind was racing. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond immediately. She just sipped her coffee, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite read. It was as if she was weighing whether or not she should say something, but in the end she simply shook her head. "I'm sorry about last night," she muttered. "I didn't want you to get involved in any of this." "You don't have to apologize," he said, standing up and moving toward her. "You didn't ask for this, but I don't know who that man is, and I don't like the way he looked at you. What's going on, Anna?" She closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering the strength to speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her coffee cup down on the table. He's part of my past," she said slowly, her voice low. "Someone I've been trying to escape for a long time." He felt a tight knot in his stomach as she spoke, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "I didn't want you to know this, but I guess I can't keep hiding it forever. The man who came here, his name is Alex. He's been following me for months now, trying to get me to come back to him." He frowned, feeling a surge of anger rise in his chest. "Why would you go back to someone like that?" Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "It's complicated," she said. "I don't know how to explain it. He wasn't always like this. At one point he was kind. He was everything I thought I needed. But then, things changed. He became controlling, manipulative. He made me feel like I had no choice but to do what he wanted." He took a deep breath, trying to process what she was saying. His mind couldn't make sense of it. "So you're telling me this guy has been stalking you and you've been running from him?" She nodded, her eyes locked on the floor. "I didn't want to be a burden, to bring trouble to your door. But I couldn't keep running alone. I don't have anyone else, and I thought—" She stopped, unable to finish her sentence. He placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to reassure her. "You're not a burden, Anna. You don't have to go through this alone. We'll figure it out." She gave him a small, almost relieved smile, but it was quickly replaced by a worried expression. "I don't know how long I can keep running. Alex has resources. He'll find me eventually." His heart sank at the thought. The more Anna spoke, the more he realized how deep her fear ran. This wasn't just some ex-boyfriend who had gotten a little too possessive. This was someone dangerous, someone who had the power to ruin her life, and now she was in his house. He wanted to protect her, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. "We need to find a way to keep you safe," he said firmly. "I can't just stand by and let him hurt you. We need to figure out what to do next." Anna looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and fear. "I don't know what my options are anymore. I've tried everything I can think of. I've moved a lot, changed my name once even. But he still finds me. I thought I could hide here, but now I see. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to stay out of his reach." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. He didn't know the full extent of what Anna had been through, but one thing was clear. She was running out of options. And it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about his daughter, too. The safety of his family was on the line. "I don't care what it takes," he said, his voice resolute. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you or to her." He motioned toward the other room where his daughter was playing with her toys. "We'll figure something out, together." Anna nodded, but she still looked uncertain, as if she couldn't fully believe his words. "I don't want to drag you into this mess," she whispered. "You've already done so much for me. You don't have to apologize," he said gently. "I've got your back, Anna. I won't let him hurt you. You're not in this alone." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them lost in their thoughts. He didn't know what the next step would be, but he knew that something had to change. This man, this Alex, wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted, and Anna couldn't keep running forever. Later that afternoon, he took Anna aside and asked her about her options. What did she think they should do? She seemed hesitant at first, but eventually she spoke up. I've thought about going to the police, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but I'm afraid they won't believe me. I don't have enough proof to show that he's stalking me, and I can't risk him finding out I'm talking to them. He's dangerous, and I don't know what he might do if he finds out. He understood her fear, but he also knew that they couldn't just sit back and wait. The longer they did nothing, the more dangerous the situation became. They needed to act, and they needed to act fast. After some discussion, they agreed that the best course of action would be to take a few steps to protect Anna without alerting Alex too soon. He would start by installing security cameras around the house. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. He also decided to call in some favors from a few friends, people he trusted who had connections that might be able to help them, even if it was just a little bit. In the meantime, Anna kept a low profile. She stayed home more often, never leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. They kept to themselves, trying to make it through each day without drawing attention. The fear of being found out hung over them like a cloud, but they were both determined to make it work. As the days went by, the tension didn't let up. But with each small step they took to protect themselves, they felt a little more in control of the situation. Anna still worried that Alex would find her, but she began to realize that she wasn't as powerless as she had once believed, and through it all, he stood by her side, willing to do whatever it took to keep her safe. It wasn't just about protecting a stranger anymore, it was about protecting a friend, someone who had become a part of his life, a part of his family. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Anna felt like she had a chance to finally be free. The days that followed were tense. Every knock on the door, every ring of the phone made them jump. Anna rarely left the house, and he made sure to be vigilant whenever she did. They had set up security cameras, changed locks, and even moved some of their daily routines around to stay unpredictable. But despite all the precautions, the fear never truly left. It lingered in quiet moments like a shadow that refused to disappear. One morning, Anna sat by the window, her hands resting on her pregnant belly. She was quiet, staring at the street as if waiting for something or someone. He watched her for a moment, unsure how to begin the conversation he knew was necessary. Anna, he said softly, I think it's time we do more than just wait. We can't keep hiding forever. We need a plan to make sure you and the baby are safe for good. She looked up, her eyes tired but determined. I know, she admitted. I've thought about it every night. I don't know what to do. He's persistent. He has resources, and I feel like no matter where I go, he'll find me. He nodded. He could see the exhaustion etched into her face. Being on the run for months or maybe even years had taken its toll. But he also saw the quiet strength in her. She was scared, yes, but she wasn't broken. That gave him hope. We have options, he said firmly. We can't let him control your life anymore. You shouldn't have to live in fear. We can get help. People who can make sure you're safe no matter what. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to put you in danger, she whispered. You've already done so much for me. He reached out and took her hand gently. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you and the baby. That's what matters. We'll face this together. They began making calls that afternoon. He reached out to an old friend who worked in security, someone who could help them set up additional measures to protect Anna. He also contacted a lawyer he trusted, someone who could advise them on restraining orders and legal steps to ensure Alex could no longer threaten her. Each call brought a small sense of relief, as if the weight of the situation was being shared instead of carried alone. Anna stayed close by during this time, occasionally resting her head on his shoulder when she felt overwhelmed. He noticed that despite her fear, there was a sense of calm when she was near him. She was still cautious, still wary of the world outside, but for the first time in months she allowed herself to believe that she might actually be safe. A few days later, Alex showed up again. This time he was more aggressive, more insistent. He rang the doorbell multiple times and called repeatedly. But they were prepared. The security cameras captured his movements, and the lawyer had already filed for a restraining order. Police officers were on standby, and their security team was monitoring the situation closely. Anna was terrified, but she didn't panic. She held his hand as they watched the footage together, knowing that this time they had support. Alex was furious, but there was nothing he could do. The law, combined with their careful planning, kept him at bay. Days turned into weeks, and gradually the tension eased. Alex tried other methods to reach her, but each attempt was thwarted. Slowly, the fear that had consumed Anna began to lift. She could finally move through her days without constantly looking over her shoulder. During this time, he saw a change in her. She smiled more, spoke more freely, and even laughed at small jokes they shared over dinner. The pregnancy became a shared joy, a light in the middle of their otherwise tense days. They discussed names for the baby, small hopes for the future, and how life might look once the baby arrived. One afternoon, Anna sat in the garden, the sunlight warming her face. He joined her, sitting on the small bench beside her. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to do all this. You didn't have to put yourself on the line for me. But you did. You saved me." He smiled gently. "You didn't need saving. You just needed a little help finding a way out. I'm glad I could be there." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he felt a sense of peace settle over them. The danger wasn't completely gone, but they had survived the worst of it. For the first time in a long time, Anna allowed herself to imagine a future free from fear, a future where she could raise her child in safety. As her due date approached, he made sure everything in the house was ready. The baby's room was prepared, small toys lined up on shelves, and a soft blanket waiting on the crib. Anna marveled at the care he put into it, noting how someone who had struggled so much could still find the time and energy to create a warm, loving environment. The day finally came when Anna went into labor. It was quiet at first, just small contractions that gradually grew stronger. He stayed by her side, holding her hand, offering words of encouragement and guiding her through each wave of pain. His daughter waited at a relative's house, knowing she couldn't be in the delivery room, but they kept in touch with updates. Hours passed, the intensity building with each moment, but finally, after a long and exhausting labor, Anna gave birth to a healthy baby. The sound of the baby's first cry filled the room, and a flood of relief and joy washed over both of them. Anna held her child close, tears streaming down her face while he watched with quiet amazement. The baby's tiny fingers curled around hers, and he realized that all the struggle, all the fear, had led to this small, miraculous moment. Anna looked up at him, her eyes shining. "We did it," she whispered. "We made it." He nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion he felt. He had helped bring a new life into the world. Yes, but more than that, he had helped Anna find safety, hope, and a chance at a future she thought she would never have. The days that followed were filled with small joys. Diaper changes, late-night feedings, and quiet moments of bonding became their new routine. The house felt alive in a different way, filled with laughter, small cries, and the soft hum of life. Anna seemed lighter, more confident, and even began planning for the future she once thought impossible. One afternoon, as he and Anna sat on the porch watching the baby sleep in the stroller, she turned to him. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said softly. "After everything I went through, I didn't think I'd ever feel safe or happy again. But you made that possible." He shook his head gently. "You made it possible too. You were brave enough to keep going, even when it seemed hopeless. I just helped you find the way." They sat in silence for a while, simply enjoying the warmth of the sun and the quiet peace of their small garden. The danger of the past still lingered like a distant shadow, but it no longer had the power to control them. They had taken back their lives piece by piece and created something beautiful in its place. As the weeks turned into months, life settled into a new rhythm. Anna and her baby grew stronger, and he watched with pride as she embraced motherhood with courage and love. His daughter adored her new sibling, and together they formed a small, happy family. Anna eventually moved to a safer city, taking a fresh start with her child. She wrote him letters and sent updates about their life, grateful for the kindness and protection he had given them. Each letter reminded him that the choices he had made, the risks he had taken, had truly changed lives. He often thought back to the day she first arrived at his door, tired and afraid, not knowing where she could turn. He realized that a single act of kindness, opening his home, offering support, showing trust, had set off a chain of events that saved 2 lives. And in the process, it had changed him too. He had discovered the power of empathy, courage, and human connection. In the quiet of his home, he would sometimes sit in the living room watching the sunset, thinking about the journey they had taken together. He knew life would continue to bring challenges, but now he also knew that with kindness, patience, and determination, even the darkest paths could lead to light. And as he reflected on everything that had happened, he understood something fundamental. Helping someone in need doesn't just change their life, it can change yours too in ways you never imagined. Months passed, and the world outside their little bubble of safety seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Anna had found a sense of peace she hadn't known for years. With the birth of her child, everything shifted. The weight of her past didn't disappear, but it became easier to carry. The days that followed were filled with new routines, early morning feedings, late-night cries, and quiet moments of bonding that made her feel, for the first time in a long while, like she could breathe. Anna wasn't alone anymore. Not only did she have the support of the man who had opened his home to her, but she also had the quiet joy of motherhood to hold on to. The baby, a little girl with wide eyes and soft curls, filled their home with an energy that was impossible to ignore. For the first time in a long time, Anna found herself smiling, even in the midst of the chaos. But as the days went on, she knew that things couldn't stay peaceful forever. The fear she had once carried had faded, but it wasn't gone. She still looked over her shoulder sometimes, wondering if someone would knock at the door, if the man from her past would show up unannounced. It wasn't that she was paranoid. It was just that the memories of the life she had run from were too fresh, too real. The house had become her sanctuary, but she was still wary. She didn't want to bring it up, but she knew that the man she lived with had noticed. He had been quiet for weeks, letting her settle in with the baby and her new life. But she could feel his concern lingering in the air. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room, he turned to her, his expression serious. "Anna," he began, his voice soft but firm, "I know you've been through a lot, and I know you're trying to put everything behind you, but I can't ignore the way you're still carrying it. It's like you're waiting for something to happen, something bad, and I can't help but wonder if you're really free from it yet." Anna looked at him, her heart sinking a little. She hadn't meant to give that impression. She had wanted to leave the fear behind, to let herself believe that she could have a fresh start. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could move on. I thought if I just kept going, I'd eventually forget it all, but sometimes I still hear his voice in my head. Sometimes I wonder if he's out there looking for me." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I get it. I really do. But you don't have to carry this on your own anymore. You have a home here. You're safe here, and I'm not going anywhere." Anna's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly blinked them away. "I don't want to keep dragging you into this. You've already done so much for me. I don't know how to repay you for all of it." "You don't have to repay me, Anna," he said with a soft smile. "You're family now, and we take care of family." She nodded, but there was still a small knot in her stomach. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that everything was behind her. But there was one thing she hadn't told him. One thing that still haunted her. Alex had always been one step ahead. When she thought she was safe, when she thought she was far enough away, he had a way of finding her. Even now, months later, she wondered if he was out there somewhere, waiting. "Maybe I'm just being paranoid," she said, trying to push the thought away. I don't know how to stop worrying. It's like this constant weight I carry around." He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to do it alone, okay? If you need help, we'll figure it out together." For the first time in a long while, Anna felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could let go of the past. Maybe it was time to stop looking over her shoulder. Maybe she could actually build the life she wanted, for herself and for her daughter. But as she sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the house around her, a knock on the door broke the stillness. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a loud knock, but it was enough to make her freeze. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide. Who could that be?" He stood up slowly, his face unreadable. "Stay here," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I'll check." Anna nodded, her breath catching in her throat. She watched him walk toward the door, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't control. Could it be Alex? Could he have found them already? As he opened the door, Anna held her breath, waiting for whatever would come next. A man stood at the doorway, tall and unfamiliar, dressed in a dark coat and holding a briefcase. He looked like he belonged to a world far removed from their quiet life, and Anna instinctively felt a sense of unease. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice polite but distant. The man she was living with stepped into the doorway, blocking the entrance. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone cautious. The stranger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is David. I'm a private investigator. I'm looking for someone named Anna." Anna's stomach dropped. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. How did they find her? How had they known? "I don't know who you're looking for," the man said, his voice growing more firm. "There's no one by that name here." David didn't seem to be deterred. "I understand," he said smoothly. "But I have reason to believe that Anna is here. I'm just trying to find out if she's safe. It's very important that I speak with her." The man she was living with stepped forward, his face set in a determined line. "I said there's no one by that name here. You need to leave." David paused, his gaze flicking briefly to the living room, where Anna was still hidden from view. "I'll be in touch," David said, before turning and walking away. Anna's heart was pounding in her chest. She wanted to run, to hide, but she stayed frozen in place. Who was this man? How did he know her name? When the door shut, the man turned to her, his face pale. "You know him, don't you?" Anna felt a cold chill settle over her. I don't know how he found me," she whispered. "But I know who he is. He works for Alex." The words hung in the air, heavy and real. It wasn't over. It wasn't even close. For the first time since they had moved in, Anna felt a wave of panic wash over her. She had hoped that her past was behind her, that she could finally move on. But now it was clear that the past wasn't done with her. And it might never be. "I thought I was safe," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "I thought we were done." He walked over to her, his expression serious but gentle. "You're safe here, Anna. We won't let anyone hurt you. Not now. Not ever." But as he said the words, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The world she had worked so hard to rebuild was now threatened again. And this time she wasn't sure if she could escape. Anna sat in the living room, her mind racing with thoughts that refused to settle. The visit from David, the private investigator, had shaken her to the core. The past she had tried so hard to leave behind was knocking at the door once again. And for the first time in months, she felt the weight of fear pressing down on her. She could feel the familiar anxiety building in her chest, the same feeling that had haunted her for so long. She had been trying to build a life for herself and her daughter, a life that was free from the shadows of her past, but now that past was threatening to tear it all apart. The man she was living with had been right there when David came to the door. He had seen the look on Anna's face, had heard the name that brought the flood of memories crashing back. Anna hadn't expected anyone to find her, not this soon. But now it was clear someone was looking for her, and that someone was still connected to the darkness she had run from. She rubbed her temples, trying to push the overwhelming thoughts away. What was she supposed to do? How could she keep her daughter safe if Alex's people were already tracking her? The man walked into the room, his presence calm but filled with an unspoken concern. He didn't sit down. Instead, he stood across from her, waiting for her to speak, to explain. He knew something had changed the moment David had left, but he hadn't pushed her. He knew better than to force the words out of her when she wasn't ready. "Anna," he said gently, his voice a quiet anchor in the sea of her anxiety. "I can't pretend to know everything you've been through, but I can see how scared you are. You don't have to keep this to yourself anymore. You've done more than enough for me. Let me help you now." His words were like a lifeline, but they also reminded her of something she had been trying to ignore: the guilt. The fear of dragging someone else into her mess. She had never meant to burden him. He had given so much already: his home, his protection, his trust. But now it felt like she was asking him to carry a weight that was too heavy for either of them. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this to affect you." He stepped closer, sitting down beside her. "You're not a burden, Anna, but I can't sit by and watch you live in fear. You're not alone in this, not now, not ever." She looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "You don't understand. This is different. It's not just some bad memory. Alex is dangerous. He's manipulative. He's done things I can't even explain. I thought I could escape him, but now I'm not sure." The man took her hands in his, holding them gently. "I don't need to know everything. I just need to know that you trust me, that you're not facing this alone. You don't have to keep running, Anna." She felt the weight of his words settle over her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to lean into his comfort, to feel something other than fear. The world outside felt cold and threatening, but here, with him, she felt warmth. It was a strange kind of peace, a fleeting moment of safety that she hadn't known was possible. She closed her eyes for a moment, collecting her thoughts. "I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I thought I was safe here, but now I'm not so sure. I've tried everything. I've run from him, I've hidden from him. But he always finds me," he nodded. "We can't let him control you anymore. Not when you've come this far." "But what if he doesn't stop?" she whispered. "What if he won't let me go? Then we'll make sure he does." The simplicity of his words was what struck her most. There was no hesitation, no doubt. He didn't know how they would fight this fight, but he was willing to. He was willing to stand beside her no matter the cost. And that was something she hadn't expected. She took another deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "You don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me," he said. "Tell me what happened. Tell me what he did. If we're going to face this, you need to trust me." Anna hesitated, her chest tightening at the thought of speaking those words aloud. The memories flooded back to her. Memories of fear, of feeling trapped, of feeling like she was losing herself bit by bit. "Alex was," she began, her voice breaking. She paused, struggling to find the right words. "He was everything I thought I wanted. At first he was charming, kind. He made me feel special, like I mattered. But then, it changed. Slowly at first. But then it became harder to leave, harder to breathe. He started controlling every part of my life. Where I went, who I spoke to. He made me feel like I couldn't exist without him." Her voice wavered as she continued. "He didn't like it when I made decisions on my own. He didn't like it when I spent too much time with friends or family. He wanted me all to himself. And when I tried to leave, when I finally realized what he was doing to me, that's when it got dangerous." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She was telling the truth now, speaking the words she had kept inside for so long. She had been afraid of sounding weak, of sounding foolish, but now she just needed to let it out. "He threatened me," she whispered. "He said that if I ever left, he'd make sure I'd regret it. He told me that no one would believe me, and for a long time I believed him. I thought if I stayed, if I played by his rules, maybe things would get better. But they never did." Her hands trembled as she held onto his. "I'm scared. I'm scared that no matter where I go, he'll find me again." He held her hands tighter, offering her a sense of strength she hadn't expected. "We'll figure this out. We'll make sure that he never gets to you again." She looked at him, her heart filled with both hope and fear. Could they really do this? Could they really fight against someone like Alex? For a moment she doubted herself, doubted everything. But then she saw something in his eyes. Something fierce, something protective. He wasn't going to let her go. He wasn't going to let Alex control her. "I don't know what to do next," she admitted, feeling small in that moment. "But I know I can't do it alone." "You're not alone," he said, his voice steady. "We'll make a plan. We'll start by protecting what's ours, by making sure no one can hurt you again." Anna nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could escape the hold that Alex had on her. Maybe she could finally be free. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. She knew that. But with him by her side, she felt like they had a chance. As the days went on, they began to put their plan into action. They contacted a lawyer, someone who had experience dealing with cases like Anna's. They worked with security experts to make sure the house was safe. And most importantly, they made sure that Anna never had to face this alone again. It wasn't the end. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something new. A new chapter in Anna's life. One where she wasn't running anymore. For the first time, she was ready to fight for the life she deserved. The days following their decision to take control of the situation felt like a blur to Anna. They were a whirlwind of appointments, discussions, and decisions that she had never imagined making. She had spent so long living in fear, never thinking about the next step, that now, with everything laid out before her, it all felt overwhelming. But as the man by her side worked tirelessly to help her, she could feel a shift happening within her. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose, of direction. The lawyer had begun to prepare a solid case, and though Anna was still unsure about how much evidence she had against Alex, she knew that she had to trust the process. There were restraining orders in place, and the local authorities had been notified. They had gone through everything: photos, old messages, even witness statements from people who had seen the changes in her over the years. But even with all these precautions, Anna still found herself looking over her shoulder. The dread, though less intense, never really left. Every time the doorbell rang or the phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat. Could it be him? Could Alex be back? The man understood. He could see it in her eyes, the way she flinched at the sound of a car driving by, how she hesitated before answering the phone. He never pushed her to talk about it, but he was always there, ready to listen if she needed to say something. He had become her rock, a source of stability in a life that had been anything but stable. It was early one morning when Anna's worst fear almost became a reality. She had been sitting by the window watching the sunrise, a warm cup of coffee in her hands. The baby was still asleep, nestled in her crib, and everything felt quiet, peaceful even. For a brief moment, Anna allowed herself to relax. Maybe, just maybe, this was the calm after the storm. But that moment of peace was shattered by a knock at the door. Her heart froze. She didn't even need to look out the window to know who it was. The anxiety that had been lying dormant inside her now surged to the surface like a tidal wave. She glanced toward the other room, where the man was, and he saw the change in her expression instantly. Without a word, he stood up, his face hardening with the same determination that had guided him since the day she arrived at his doorstep. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Stay with the baby. I won't let him get to you." Anna nodded, but her heart was in her throat. She knew he meant well, but part of her was afraid. Afraid of what Alex might do, afraid of what it might mean for them. She had no idea how he had found them again, but she couldn't deny the gut-wrenching fear that told her it was happening all over again. The man moved toward the door, his steps slow, but purposeful. Anna stayed where she was, holding her breath. She had no idea how this confrontation would go, but she knew she couldn't run anymore. She couldn't hide. Not this time. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. Anna's stomach twisted. She couldn't help it. She had to move. She stood up, slowly making her way toward the door. She wasn't sure what she planned to do, but she couldn't just sit there waiting. As she reached the hallway, she heard the sound of the door opening. The man's voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the tension in it. "I told you not to come here." Anna's heart was in her throat as she approached the door. She peered around the corner, trying to see who was standing there, and then her breath caught in her chest. There was Alex. His face was unchanged, as cold and calculating as she remembered. His eyes locked onto hers immediately, and for a moment, it felt like the world around them disappeared. "You don't get to be here," the man said, his voice louder now, filled with authority. Anna could feel her knees going weak as she stood there in the hallway, paralyzed by the sight of him. It was like a part of her had never left, a part that had been frozen in time with Alex. She had hoped, so desperately hoped, that she had escaped him for good. But there he was, standing in her life once again, uninvited and unwanted. "She's not going anywhere with you," the man continued, his tone unwavering. "You need to leave now." Anna could see the frustration in Alex's eyes, the same frustration that had once twisted him into someone she no longer recognized. He took a step forward, but the man blocked him, stepping into his path with a clear warning in his stance. "You think you can just keep her from me?" Alex sneered, his voice low but dangerous. "I'm not asking," the man said, his words sharp. "You have no claim on her. Not anymore." Anna felt like she was floating, unable to process the words being exchanged. Everything seemed surreal, like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. But as she watched the two men, one who had brought her safety and comfort and the other who had once owned her life, she knew what needed to happen. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm done with you, Alex. I'm done being afraid of you. I'm not your property, and I never was." The words felt like a release, a final break from the man who had once controlled her. She had been scared to speak them, scared of the consequences, but now, standing there in the doorway with the man beside her, she felt empowered. Alex's eyes flickered with anger, but something else was there too, a small flicker of uncertainty. He had expected fear, expected her to shrink back into the shadows, to give in like she always had. But she didn't. She stood her ground, and the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. "You're making a mistake, Anna," he said, his voice suddenly softer. "You can't escape this. You can't escape me." She shook her head, feeling a strength she had never known. "I already have," she said, her voice steady now. "You're not a part of my life anymore." The man behind her took a step closer, his presence an unspoken promise of protection. "And if you come near her again, I'll make sure you regret it." Alex stared at them for a long moment, his jaw clenched tight. But then, without another word, he turned and walked away. There was no fight, no more words. He simply left. As soon as the door closed behind him, Anna felt like she could breathe again. It was over. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was free. The man stood beside her, watching the door for a moment, ensuring that Alex had truly left. Then he turned to her, his expression softening. "You're safe," he said quietly. "He's gone." Anna exhaled a shaky breath. "I can't believe it. I thought I was always going to be looking over my shoulder. That he would always be there." He placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her the reassurance she desperately needed. "Not anymore. You don't have to be afraid anymore." She nodded, the weight in her chest finally beginning to lift. There was still a long road ahead, and there were things they still had to work through. But for the first time in a long time, Anna felt hope. She turned to the man beside her, the one who had given her a chance at a new life, at freedom. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said with a small smile. "You're family now, and I'll always protect you." Anna smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She wasn't alone anymore, and no matter what came next, she knew she would face it with strength, because she had the one thing she'd never had before: a future.